Hello, Seaside Shadows, and welcome to Witchy Wednesday. I am so excited to be back with you for another one of our fabulous feast days. So this Witchy Wednesday starts us off in the month of September. Now, September is the time where you're probably getting ready to go to the harvest fairs. I know I am, that you're getting ready to harvest your own gardens, that you're starting to maybe smell pumpkin spice in the air. If you're in Connecticut, that nutmeg smell is in the air. You're planning hay rides, all your fun fall activities. We're getting excited. And while we're all heavily focused on the October 31st celebration of All Hallows Eve, which we know also as Samhain, there is a fabulous second fall festival that comes even before Samhain, which allows us to celebrate twice, which is why we see all of these harvest celebrations coming up. And that is the Harvest Festival of Mabon. Now, Mabon doesn't historically go by this name, though the feast festival timing of itself being toward the end of September is sort of the equinox, if you will, September 21st. That's when we're starting to see equal time of dark and light coming back in. We're welcoming winter. We're welcoming the season of the dark. We're saying goodbye to the sun. Now, this is an incredibly important day in the history of celebrations of harvest. And this is also when we want to reflect back on what we did with Ostera and the spring equinox. Remember when we made our eggs? This is when you want to start to think about what your wishes were, what your intentions were. Reflect on them. Have they come true? Is this what you were pursuing in the spring? Now, this is also a time where we're starting to balance the femininity and masculinity within each of us, celebrating the gods and goddesses in that ancient way. Now, the sun's power again is waning as night grows longer, and the saps from the trees are going back to the earth, and we want to honor all of these nature cycles. Now, the goddess is considered the radiant harvest queen, and the god finally dies with his gift of pure love with the cutting of the last grain. So he does this for the queen. So I, kind of like this holiday. It's kind of nice. The queen gets to come in charge of fall. Maybe that explains why so many ladies like the fall. Who's to say? But as the grain is harvested from Lammas celebrations, which you may have also had, and reaches completion, we enjoy the abundance of fruits and vegetables. So we have here kind of an abundance of things we're going to talk about today. Apples, bread should be at every feast that you have. And we're going to be talking about the magic of apples in a moment. But I first want to bring you back to some of the roots, the Greek roots that go with this particular holiday of Mabon and going into winter. A lot of us think of this holiday as dating back to Greek tradition. Now, there are Nordic traditions that go back to this holiday as well, but they actually have a lot of their similarities at the springtime with their apples, and their apples get stolen by Loki a lot because they're considered wisdom and give you immortal life, so he'll steal them from the other gods and goddesses. And apples really started to come into play with Norse mythology, but they also come into play when we're getting involved into Mabon because they are believed to have this divine ability to tell us the future and to honor all of the elements that Mabon is celebrating. But let's go back to the Greeks, the underworld, Hades, Persephone. How do we get here? Now, we're going to have you guys view the fire a little bit while I read you the story of Persephone and Hades and how we came into being here at this time of Mabon, thinking about this incredible journey. Now, Demeter was the mother to Persephone, and she left her to play one day with the sea nymphs called Nereids and Naiads, who were the freshwater nymphs of the lakes, springs, and rivers. Demeter went to supervise her bountiful crops. As Persephone engaged playing with the rest of the groups, her attention fell upon the potently fragrant valley nearby, and she couldn't take her eyes off of the yellow flower Narcissus. She called upon her playmates to accompany her, but they couldn't go with her as leaving the side of their water bodies would result in death. The flower Narcissus was planted there by Gaia, who was following the orders of Zeus. The goal was to enchant Persephone and attract her away from her guides. Persephone danced her way to the garden alone and tried to pluck the Narcissus from the bosom of Gaia. It drained her energies as the Narcissus only came out after a lot of pulling. But suddenly, to her utter fright, she saw the tiny hole from which she had drawn out the flower shaft began to rapidly grow in size until it started to resemble a mighty, enormous chasm. From this came the vigorous galloping sounds of multiple horses, and sudden happenings only froze the frail beauty to her feet. Out of all her friends, only the naiad Cyan tried to rescue the crying Persephone, but she was no match for what emerged from the underworld, the powerful Hades. Bereaving her friends, kidnapped Cyan melted into a pool of tears and formed the river Cyan at the spot. Demeter rushed back to where she had left her daughter and found only the Cyan River there with the nymphs weeping. Worried as she was, she asked all as to the whereabouts of her beloved daughter. She cursed all the nymphs into becoming heinous women with plumed bodies and scaly feet called the Sirens. It was only the river Cyan who helped her by washing over the belt of Persephone, indicating that something gravely wrong had happened. Demeter went mad and hunted for her daughter everywhere. The myth says that she even disguised herself as an aged lady with lighted torches in her hands, roaming the earth for 9 long days and 9 long nights. Finally, she met Hecate, the deity of magic, witchcraft, spirits, and crossroads. At the dawn of the 10th day, Hecate had pity at her dismal condition, and they agreed to help each other. And they also sought help from Helios, the sun god. Helios told Demeter all about how Hades had dragged Persephone into the underworld. Persephone's mother, Demeter, begged her brother Hades to allow Persephone to come back to the livings, denoting the young Persephone was not supposed to live in the underworld. Hades consulted with Zeus, and they both decided they would allow Persephone to live on Earth for 6 months of the year, while the rest of the time she would be in the underworld. Before leaving the underworld, Persephone had been persuaded to eat 4 seeds of a pomegranate. And in ancient mythology, to eat the fruit of one's captor meant that one would return to that captor. So Persephone was doomed to return to the underworld for 4 months of the year, but she could spend 2/3 of the year with her Earth mother, Demeter. The myth of Hades and Persephone is associated with the coming of spring and winter. When Persephone comes to Earth, it's spring. When she descends to Hades, it's winter. Winter, Mabon, we're getting to the dark. So this is a time where we do a lot of dark rituals in honor of some of these gods and goddesses. And we call them the Dark Mother rituals, because this is really about a lot of the mothers that are associated with Mabon. And you can look up so many of them in each tradition. It doesn't have to be Persephone and Demeter. They just tend to be the ones that we gravitate to because of that story of the underworld, that story of that woman being persuaded by the fruits that Gaia had left, being torn down into the darkness and held there. But without light, there was no balance. And without dark, there was no balance. The underworld and the upper world had to be served. And those fruits become incredibly important at Mabon because of what Persephone endured. Now, you may find that when you hold your Mabon ritual on September 21st, you could decorate your altar, whatever your altar may be, with anything that you may want to leave to these gods or goddesses. Perhaps you want to leave something to Hecate. That is absolutely fine too. Now, you can add flowers in your basket. If you want to leave them for Demeter, you want to go to red and yellow. If you want to leave something for Persephone, you want to leave purple or black, and you can even leave stalks of wheat or Indian corn. If you have a sickle, this is a really great time to have that out and channel the energy of the dark goddess. Now, I brought a candle with you today. We can light a candle for Persephone. We can light a candle for Demeter, and there's a variety of other goddesses we could light them for, but I really like the idea of lighting it for Persephone. She's the one that took the fruit. So I'm going to teach you guys the incantation that goes with lighting it for Persephone. So we're going to light this candle. Give it a minute to catch flame. This is a Scandinavian candle, so I can't help but bring my Norse goddesses into this. It was been sitting with my Freya statue for a while. But what we want to say to Persephone is this: the land is beginning to die, and the soil grows cold. The fertile womb of the earth has gone barren. As Persephone descended into the underworld, so the earth continues its descent into night. As Demeter mourns the loss of her daughter, so we mourn the days drawing shorter. The winter will soon be here. Now, if we want to talk to Demeter, which you might, especially if you're a mother or you have someone you care for and nurture, you might say this. In her anger and sorrow, Demeter roamed the earth, and the crops died, and life withered, and the soil went dormant. In grief, she traveled looking for her lost child, leaving darkness behind in her wake. We feel the mother's pain, and our hearts break for her. As she searches for the child she gave birth to, we welcome darkness in her honor. 6 months of light, 6 months of dark. The earth goes to sleep and later wakes again. O dark mother, we honor you this night and dance in your shadows. We embrace that which is the darkness and celebrate the life of the crone. Blessings to the dark goddess on this night and every other. So you can do this throughout the month to welcome in the dark and know that you too are honoring the mothers that came before you. Now, I want to get into a bit lighter side of everything and talk about the fruits and the apples and how we can welcome some really good things at harvest time. And in folklore, apples are associated with a great deal of magic. And there are a number of deities connected to apples, including Eris. She's the goddess of discord, so a little bit of chaos. If you have a little bit of chaos, she's not a bad goddess to go to. And Pamina, who literally just watched over orchards. The apple is a symbol of abundance. So if you're trying to attract wealth into your life, you're going to want to have some apples in your life. And it had bounty in many cultures. A plentiful apple crop meant the rest of your harvest would be prosperous. Now, in Norse mythology, apples were associated with the goddess Idunn. Now, she was a spring goddess, and I think I mentioned to you, Loki was a bit of a punk, and at one point, Loki, the trickster, fooled her into turning over her magical apples, and so the other gods and goddesses lost some of their power, and they got it back when Loki returned the apples to Idunn, and this was to give them their immortality, so they really wanted that power back. For the ancient Greeks, apples were actually to blame for most of the Trojan War. Eris, the goddess of chaos, did not receive an invitation to a banquet. Oh no, who doesn't invite the goddess, right? And with the rest of the gods and goddesses of Olympus, she was standing outside the doors of all of their party. So she crashed the event and brought with her a fancy golden apple. When she does this, it is decreed that the apple would go to whichever goddess judged the fairest by Paris. Who do you think Paris is going to pick? I'm going to give you a hint. It's the goddess of love, Aphrodite. We know he's going to pick her. Yeah, I know. Not a shocking end to that story, right? And she offered him, for picking her, of course, Helen of Sparta, wife of King Menelaus, as a thank you gift. Hera was displeased, so she decided that to pay Paris back by doing everything in her power to siege Troy destroyed in the war, it all links back to a golden apple. If you've read Arthurian legends, Avalon means Island of Apples, and it's the place where all of the significant events take place. The mighty sword Excalibur is forged on Avalon. So we see a lot of power that's coming through with apples, and they're popular tales, as we mentioned, for divining the future. So let's play a little bit with our apples and see what they do. Now, one legend states, and I have my apple peeler here, that if you can peel across the apple one large piece of skin, oops, I already messed that up. I'll eat it. We're going to try to go across here. You're going to try to get it to go as close to around the apple as you can. Try to get it all the way. I'll go a little bit under so I can get back to where I started. Perfect. Once you do this, you have this long peel here, right? What you're going to do is you're going to drop it on the ground. Maybe put your energy into it first. And this is for those of you who are looking for love, who aren't sure where love is taking them. And if you throw it on the ground, close your eyes, it should form the name of your true love in their first initial, be it. Now, I threw it. I'm going to hope that looks like an M. Does it look like an M to you, Marty?
No.
Marty says no. That's too bad because he's my husband. So I'm going to say it looks like an M, though he seems a little bit, from my side, it looks like an M. We're going to call it an M. But it's supposed to reveal the initial of your true love. Marty's looking contemplatively behind the camera. He is suspicious of why that is not a clear M if he is my true love. Now, there are other things that you can do with the apple if you want. You can wait until midnight. I'm at that hour anyway. Not that I'm looking for love, right, Marty? You're gonna cut it into 9 pieces, and then you're gonna look into the mirror and you'll see the face of your true love. That's a little creepy. I think I'd rather see the initial, right? Why is someone else's face in my mirror? Now, if a girl has more than one potential lover, you wanna peel the apple and pull out the seeds and place a wet seed on your cheek for each boyfriend. The last one left stuck to the skin represents the suitor who is the true love. Now, we have a lot of harvest rites that we can do with apples, but one that goes with a lot of Wiccan tradition, which people really enjoy, is looking at the middle of the apple. Now, what is stated in the magic of the apple is that if we cut it widthwise, you're going to see the pentacle. See that right there? The witch's magic, the sign of your 5 elements, the sign of all of Earth's representation that comes here in that magic. See, beautiful. So you might want to cut those so that you have the stars that are representing earth, air, wind, fire, water. Here in your apple, it harnesses all of Earth's magic. It harnesses all of your intuitive magic that goes with your senses right here in the pentacle. So you have your apple magic that can just be done by cutting apples and harvesting in them in that way by the fire and setting your intentions. Now, I think apple magic is most enjoyed, right? Most enjoyed when it can be consumed. Because how else are we supposed to take in all of the wisdom and love and divination of the apple unless we can eat it? Now, eating an apple on its own is plentiful, delicious, right? And it even dates back to, you know, some biblical tales here, right? We're all drawn to the apple. However, I have a favorite recipe, and I'm gonna walk through it with you guys today. And this is a family recipe that is passed down by my Irish grandmother, who got it from her mother, and it's apple brown Betty. Now, you may have your own recipes for it. I used to grow up thinking that my family had the only recipe for it. I realized as an adult that it's not true, that it's actually a well-known dessert. But I particularly love this recipe, and I wanted to be able here at Mabon to share it with all of you. So I have with me all of the ingredients, and I'm gonna go over what you need for a successful apple brown Betty that's pretty tasty in my opinion. Now, what we have here for ingredients, it's pretty easy. It's just the ingredients mixed together. Is 1 cup of butter. A lot of people prefer unsalted butter in their baking. I'm gonna be honest with you, I actually prefer salted butter in my baking. Probably makes it a little more unhealthy, probably why it always goes over well, but that is my particular preference. So you have a cup of butter. Now, you're also going to have 2 cups of flour. You're going to have a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I have mixed in this bowl, well, they're kind of separated. You have your 1/2 teaspoon of salt. You have a teaspoon of baking soda. You have a teaspoon of baking powder, and you also have 2 teaspoons cinnamon. You're thinking, Courtney, can't I just use self-rising flour? Probably. But go with it this way so you know that you're doing it the way that I'm teaching you, right? So you're going to mix that all together, and also with your 2 cups of sugar. Now, once you've done that and mixed that all together, you're gonna add a couple eggs. So let's start just putting some things in the bowl, shall we? Got everything prepared for you anyway, why not? Ooh, we should get the water out of the bowl. I know, baking outside, how dare I? I could probably make it over the fire if I was feeling really ambitious. Put it right there in that. Okay, so you have your 2 cups of butter, and then you're going to mix in your flour. That should be what comes next. Or sorry, 1 cup of butter. Don't do 2 cups of butter. That's probably too much for even the best butter lover. So 1 cup of butter, 2 cups of flour, and then we're going to mix in our 2 cups of sugar. I know, that's a lot of sugar. You're like, Courtney, but it's so good. It's so worth it. Butter, sugar, you already know it's gonna taste good before I add in anything else, right? Now, I always put more cinnamon than they ask for. I love baking and I love a little extra flavor. We're gonna put in the baking soda, baking powder, salt, and cinnamon. Right in here. Make sure it's all out of there. It already smells delicious and I haven't baked a darn thing yet. Now you have all of that in there, and then you want to put together 2 eggs with it. Okay, I like to use organic farm fresh eggs. If you have chickens, all the better. My sister has chickens up the road, so sometimes I steal some of her eggs. Okay, all in one bowl. I know, super, super easy. Then you're going to put this in sort of a mixer if you have it. I brought this out, but it's much easier, especially with the amount of butter you have, to not make yourself do this by hand. So you're gonna mix this all together, hopefully with a blender that you have. And then what I have here are 4 cups of thinly sliced apples. Thinly sliced is important that I mention this because if you have them too chunky, your apple brown betty is going to get watered down. I prefer to use Granny Smith apples. They're very tart, very sweet, but you can really use any apple that's your favorite. But make sure it's one that, you know, you prefer for baking in that regard. Then you're going to have a 9x13 pan, unless you really want to make it in a Dutch oven over a fire, which could be worth experimenting with. I just don't know the exact timing on that. But you're going to put it in a 9x13 pan that you have, of course, made sure that you have your Crisco or your butter around so that nothing burns. And once you do this in the greased pan, you're baking it for 40 to 45 minutes at 350 degrees. And then you're done. You're done. That's it. And then you have a delicious apple brown betty. And then you can have that divine magic within you. So those are some things that we'll be doing this September for Mabon. Baking, making sure that we honor apples, talking to Demeter and Persephone, making sure that we honor all that is to come from what our manifestations are that we made in the spring. Do not forget them. Keep them in your heart. Let that abundance come in from the apples and bring them to you, and celebrate this wonderful harvest. We'll be back with you, of course, for Samhain with all sorts of adventures. Thank you for joining us on this Witchy Wednesday, and we will see you next week for Cemetery Saturday.